They say there's a beach hidden along the Brazilian coast that never appears in travel guides, a place untouched by tourism, known only to local fishermen and whispered about by those who have heard the stories. People call it by many names: the Forgotten Shore, the Mouth of the Sea, or, as one old man muttered to me in a trembling voice, the beach that swallows visitors. That name stuck with me in the days leading up to my decision to go there. I knew it wasn't just a campfire legend meant to scare outsiders, because the reports were real. Tourists had gone missing there. Families came to spend the day, couples set up their tents, solo travelers passed through, and then they were gone. No cries for help, no signs of struggle, only scattered belongings left behind in the sand. Authorities never found bodies, never found answers. The sea, always calm and glassy, seemed to hold its secrets well. And yet, despite every warning, I found myself walking the narrow trail carved into the forest, a path trodden only by fishermen's boots. The air grew heavier the deeper I went, the sound of leaves crunching under my feet the only sign of life around me. Finally, I pushed past the last curtain of branches, and there it was, an opening that revealed the ocean stretched wide before me. For a moment, I forgot the stories. The place was breathtaking. The waves shimmered like liquid glass under the sun. The sand gleamed with a golden hue so bright it looked unreal. But beauty has its traps, and what unsettled me most wasn't what I saw. It was what I didn't. There were no birds overhead, no rustle of wind through the trees, not even the natural chorus of the jungle. Silence clung to the air, thick and suffocating, as if the world itself was holding its breath, watching me. That was when the old fisherman's words rang in my head again, louder this time, like an omen. This beach devours visitors. I stood there, staring at the horizon, trying to convince myself that legends are nothing but stories. Yet, deep down, I knew I had already stepped into one. And now, as I tell you this, I need to ask, would you dare set foot on this beach after hearing what I'm about to reveal? Locals rarely speak of this place openly, and when they do, their voices drop as if the trees themselves are listening. The small fishing village closest to the beach carries decades of whispers, warnings passed down from parents to children: never wander too far, never sleep on the sand, never trust the calm of the tide. Officially, nothing exists on any map. No name, no marker, just an empty stretch of coastline erased from the public eye. But the people who live nearby know its reputation too well. They say entire groups of travelers once disappeared there, backpackers who came seeking adventure, couples who never returned from a sunset walk, families who left their belongings neatly folded on the shore as if they had gone for a swim, but were never seen again. Police investigations are scarce, and the few reports that do exist are filled with contradictions: missing persons with no signs of foul play, objects washed up days later, but no trace of the people themselves. Some claim the government avoids digging too deeply because the truth would only fuel panic. Others insist that the place is cursed, that something ancient dwells in the sand and sea, punishing anyone who trespasses. And yet, despite the fear, I couldn't resist. I had to see for myself what made this beach so infamous, what made even the bravest men tremble when asked about it. As I walked further down the sand, the weight of those stories pressed on me, as if every step was echoing the last steps of those who had vanished before. I told myself it was just a legend, nothing more, but deep inside, I could feel the same unease the villagers described. A sense that this beach was alive, watching, waiting. At first glance, the beach looked untouched, a perfect postcard scene hidden away from the world. But as I walked further along the shore, the cracks in its beauty began to show. The sand, though golden and soft, was littered with odd remnants. An old pair of sunglasses half buried, a child's flip-flop faded from the sun, the frame of a tent torn apart by time. They weren't the kind of objects carried by waves. They looked abandoned, as if the owners had left in a hurry and never returned. I crouched down, brushing sand from the broken strap of a backpack, and my stomach tightened when I noticed how new it looked compared to the rusted metal around it. Someone had been here not long ago. The silence pressed down heavier, broken only by the faint hiss of the tide pulling back against the rocks. I scanned the tree line behind me, expecting to see someone watching, but there was nothing, only shadows stretching deeper than they should in daylight. That was when I felt it, the weight of unseen eyes. It was irrational, I told myself, but the sensation wouldn't leave. Every step I took seemed accompanied by another, just out of sync, as if footsteps echoed mine but never quite aligned. The further I went, the stronger the feeling became. And though there was no one in sight, the emptiness itself felt predatory, as if the beach was not abandoned at all, but waiting, aware of me, almost breathing. The change came so suddenly it felt unnatural, as if the air itself had shifted moods. A breeze swept across the sand, sharp and cold, and within seconds it grew into a restless wind that cut through the emptiness like a blade. The strange part was that the ocean, which should have mirrored the change, remained still, its surface unbroken, a sheet of dark glass glinting under the sunlight. The contradiction unsettled me. I stopped walking and listened, every muscle tense. The palms at the edge of the jungle swayed violently, leaves snapping and branches creaking as if something massive had brushed past them. But when I looked, the tree line appeared untouched, frozen in a stillness that made the violent sounds even more disturbing. Then I heard it, faint at first, almost hidden beneath the sigh of the wind. Voices, human voices, not laughter or shouts, but hushed tones, overlapping, like a conversation just out of reach. They carried on the wind for only a moment, weaving in and out of clarity, and though I strained to make sense of the words, they slipped away like water through my fingers. My heart began to hammer against my chest. This was no trick of imagination. Someone or something was out there. I spun around slowly, scanning every corner of the beach. The expanse of sand stretched wide, untouched by footprints but my own. The sea lay calm, reflecting the sky in shimmering silence. Behind me, the jungle loomed like a wall of green shadows, thick and impenetrable. No figures, no faces, no explanation. And yet, the voices had been real, I was certain. Then, as quickly as they had come, they vanished, swallowed by silence so complete it rang in my ears. The abruptness of it was worse than the sound itself, as though whatever had spoken had realized it was being heard and decided to hide again. I tried to steady my breathing, whispering under my breath that it was only the wind funneling through the rocks, creating echoes that my mind shaped into words. It was the only explanation I could accept. But just as I convinced myself, something flickered at the edge of my vision. I snapped my head toward the forest, and for a fraction of a second I saw it. A shadow darting between the trees, swift, deliberate, and unmistakably human-shaped. My breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen, eyes locked on the dark line of jungle. Nothing moved. The leaves hung heavy and still, the branches stretched in silent defiance. Had I really seen it? Or was the beach toying with me, drawing me into the same paranoia that might have consumed those who disappeared before me? I wanted to believe it was just an animal, a monkey maybe, or some wild cat. But the shape had been too tall, too precise, too purposeful. It hadn't slinked like an animal, it had moved with intent, like a person keeping just out of sight. The feeling of being observed returned stronger than ever, crawling up my spine, wrapping around my chest like invisible hands. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to turn back, to never look over my shoulder again. But curiosity has a way of silencing fear, of pushing you one step further into danger before you realize you're too deep to escape. I stood there, gripping the strap of my backpack, the waves unmoving behind me, the forest concealing its secrets ahead. The silence pressed in tighter, suffocating. And then, breaking it once more, came the sound of a branch snapping, sharp, deliberate, impossibly close. I froze where I stood, my ears straining to catch the slightest sound, my eyes locked on the tree line that had betrayed me with that single crack of a branch. Nothing moved now, and the forest loomed in eerie silence, as if it had swallowed the sound whole. A rational part of me wanted to turn back immediately, to follow the same narrow path that had brought me here and pretend I had never stepped onto this cursed sand. But another part, the reckless, foolish part, urged me forward. If I left now, I would never know what lay beyond the surface of this beach, what secrets it truly held. And so, tightening my grip on the straps of my backpack, I forced my legs to keep moving. As I walked further along the shore, the tide whispered against the rocks, low and steady, yet something about its rhythm was off. It didn't sound natural. There was a pulse to it, like a hidden cadence, as though the sea itself was breathing. The sand here felt different too, softer, looser, as if it had been disturbed recently. My boots sank deeper with each step, and when I crouched to inspect the ground, I noticed something that turned my blood cold. Footprints. Not old, faded ones, but fresh impressions, trailing toward the water. They were bare, human, and led straight into the waves. But here was the strangest part. They did not come back out. The prints vanished at the edge of the tide, swallowed whole by the sea, as if the person had simply kept walking forward into the water and never returned. I straightened slowly, scanning the horizon. That was when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the sunlight, reflecting off the surface. But as I squinted against the glare, the shape became clearer. Out in the water, maybe 30 or 40 feet from the shore, stood a silhouette, upright, human, perfectly still. My chest tightened as I tried to make sense of it. No swimmer could stand like that, rooted to one spot. The waves weren't high enough to hide movement, and yet this figure did not shift, did not wade, did not even sway with the current. It was like a statue carved into the sea itself. I called out, my voice cracking against the silence, hoping it might be another traveler, another fool like me who had heard the stories and come searching for answers. But the figure gave no response. It did not turn its head, did not raise a hand, did not acknowledge me at all. I blinked, and for a moment the glare of the sun made me lose sight of it. When my eyes adjusted again, the figure was gone. The sea lay empty, calm as glass, as though nothing had ever been there. A chill swept through me that had nothing to do with the breeze. I backed away from the water instinctively, my mind scrambling for explanations. Heat haze, an illusion, exhaustion, but deep down I knew better. This beach was not empty. Something was here with me. Something that had watched countless others before, luring them closer to the waves until they vanished like smoke in the wind. My pulse quickened, and though I wanted to convince myself it was paranoia, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had stood in that water was still there, just beneath the surface, waiting for me to step closer. I forced myself to keep walking, though every instinct screamed at me to leave. The air felt thicker now, heavy with a kind of pressure that made each breath shallow, as if the beach itself was exhaling against me. The silence returned, deeper than before, and each of my steps sounded unnaturally loud in the emptiness. I tried not to look back at the ocean, afraid of what I might see waiting on the horizon, but its stillness seemed to stretch across my peripheral vision, pulling at me like an unseen magnet. I veered toward the higher sand, closer to the tree line, hoping the sight of solid ground would steady me. That was when I noticed something unusual sticking out from the sand a few feet ahead. At first, I thought it was just driftwood, a piece of debris washed ashore, but as I crouched closer, my hand brushed against something smooth, something unmistakably man-made. I dug carefully, pulling away handfuls of sand until the shape revealed itself. A camera. Half buried, half swallowed by the beach, its casing was worn but not destroyed. It hadn't been there long. My heart began to pound as I wiped away the grains from the lens and body. It wasn't an old relic. It was modern. Someone had lost it recently. Someone who had probably stood where I was standing now. With trembling hands, I pressed the power button. For a moment, I expected nothing, but the screen flickered to life, dim yet functional. Relief surged through me, followed instantly by dread. The memory card was still inside. I opened the gallery, and the first images appeared. Tourists, smiling faces, a young couple standing together with the ocean behind them, their arms wrapped around each other, a group of friends laughing, half drenched from the waves, a child building a sandcastle near the tree line. They looked so alive, so ordinary, the kind of pictures anyone would take on vacation. But the background unsettled me. Every shot was framed by this same empty beach, the same golden sand, the same unnaturally still water. I flipped through quickly, my chest tightening with each photo. The sequence seemed normal at first, sunlit selfies, playful splashes in the water. But then the mood shifted, the smiles faded, the last images grew blurred, frantic, as though the camera had been dropped and picked up again in a hurry. A hand reached toward the lens, obscuring the frame. And then the final picture stopped me cold, the ocean, vast and endless, stretching outward with no one in sight. No people, no laughter, just the water, shimmering in silence, as though it had consumed them all. The screen dimmed and went black in my hands, leaving my reflection staring back at me in the dark glass of the display. I clutched the camera tightly, my palms damp with sweat. Whoever these people were, they had vanished here, just like the story said. The police reports, the rumors, the whispered warnings, they weren't exaggerations. I wasn't just walking into superstition. I was standing in the middle of it. And now, with this camera as proof, the weight of their absence pressed down on me harder than ever. I looked up from the device and glanced toward the sea, and for the first time since stepping onto this cursed sand, I truly believed I might not leave it alive. The camera felt heavier in my hands the longer I stared at it, as if it carried not just the weight of its missing owners, but the silent warning of what had taken them. I wanted to throw it back into the sand, bury it, pretend I had never seen the faces smiling in those photographs, but some instinct wouldn't let me. It was evidence, yes, but more than that, it was a story left unfinished, and something inside me whispered that if I stayed long enough, I might find the missing ending. That thought should have terrified me more than it did, but by then fear had already settled deep into my bones, and curiosity was the only thing strong enough to keep me standing. The sun was lowering now, slipping behind the cliffs in the distance, painting the beach in gold and crimson. Shadows stretched long across the sand, crawling toward me as if the night itself was eager to claim the place. The air grew colder, the breeze sharper, and for the first time since my arrival, the sound of the ocean changed. It wasn't louder exactly, still calm, still deceptively serene, but there was a new undertone, a subtle vibration like a low hum, rising and falling with the tide. It didn't feel like waves anymore, it felt like breathing. I sat down near the dunes, clutching the camera to my chest, my eyes fixed on the water. If the stories were true, if people disappeared here without a trace, then it had to happen under conditions like these. When the light faded, when the silence deepened, when the ocean began to whisper, I told myself I would wait. I would see what they had seen. Maybe I would understand what had pulled them away from the safety of the sand into whatever abyss awaited beyond the shoreline. The minutes dragged, each one stretching into hours. My nerves prickled at every sound, the creak of the trees swaying, the hiss of the tide pulling back, the faint rustle of sand shifting beneath me though I wasn't moving. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps again, pacing along the forest's edge. Slow, careful, watching. I refused to look away from the ocean, though. I knew that was where the real danger lay. My pulse throbbed in my temples, and I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. Darkness came faster than I expected. One moment the horizon was glowing, the next it was swallowed whole by shadows, leaving only a silver sliver of moonlight reflecting on the still water. And then it began. The hum I had heard before grew clearer, sharper, almost like voices layered together. Not quite singing, not quite speaking, something in between, like dozens of throats chanting in unison from beneath the waves. The sound was soft at first, but the longer I listened, the more it pressed against me, vibrating in my chest, seeping into my thoughts. I leaned forward, squinting at the surface of the sea. At first there was nothing, only the moonlight glinting across the dark expanse. But then movement broke the stillness. Ripples spread outward, slow and deliberate, and from the center of them rose shapes, tall, thin, human. They were silhouettes at first, black against the silver sheen, standing where no one should stand, their outlines shimmering like heat mirages. My breath caught. They weren't swimming, weren't floating. They were simply there, upright, motionless, as if the ocean had decided to lend them a body for a moment. My mouth went dry as I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, each figure separated by the exact same distance, evenly spaced like soldiers in a line. Their heads tilted slightly toward the shore, toward me, though I couldn't see their faces. My grip tightened around the camera until my knuckles turned white, but I couldn't lift it. My hands wouldn't obey. All I could do was stare. As the chanting grew louder, a chorus rising from the depths beckoning me without words, pulling me closer with every breath I took. And in that moment, I realized the truth behind the disappearances. The beach didn't need to drag people away by force. It didn't need violence or storms or monsters rising from the deep. It only needed patience. It waited until the darkness fell, until the ocean began to sing, and then it called. And those who answered never returned. The chanting rose like a tide, growing louder with every breath, until it no longer sounded like voices carried across the water, but like something vibrating inside my skull. My chest tightened, my heartbeat racing in sync with the rhythm, and for a horrifying moment, I felt as though the sound wasn't just reaching me, it was entering me, seeping into the marrow of my bones, urging me to stand, to walk, to surrender. I gritted my teeth, digging my fingers into the sand beside me, but the pressure only mounted. The figures remained still, their outlines sharp against the moonlight, their faceless heads turned in my direction, waiting. Then the ocean moved. Not like normal waves, but in a sudden, unnatural shudder, as though something vast had stirred beneath the surface. The still water broke apart, rippling outward in jagged patterns that didn't match the wind or tide. My eyes widened as the silhouettes wavered, stretching and bending before returning to shape, their forms more defined now, more solid. The hum of their chorus grew into a resonant pull that seemed to reach directly into my chest. Against every desperate instinct, I found myself leaning forward, my knees pressing into the wet sand, as if invisible hands were tugging me toward the shore. The first step was almost unconscious. My boots sank into the damp edge where the waves kissed the sand, the cold water licking at my ankles. I gasped and pulled back, but my body betrayed me. The chanting deepened, layered, hypnotic, and my muscles moved without permission. Another step, then another. Panic surged through me. I clawed at my own legs, trying to anchor myself, but the sand beneath me shifted in unnatural ways, swallowing my feet deeper with each second, pulling me down like quicksand. I tried to shout, to scream, to release any sound that might break the spell, but nothing came out. My throat locked, strangled by the pressure of their call. My lungs burned as if the air itself had turned against me. The camera slipped from my grip and fell into the water with a dull splash, its screen flickering once before the tide began to claim it. That was when I felt it, something cold wrapping around my ankle. It wasn't seaweed, it wasn't the pull of the tide. It was fingers, long, thin, bony fingers, curling tightly around my leg with a grip that burned with ice. I thrashed, yanking backward, but the sand beneath me gave way even further, sucking me down to my shins. The water surged higher, lapping at my knees now. Though the tide had been calm minutes ago, my heart hammered in my chest as the chanting swelled into a deafening roar, as if the ocean itself was singing through them. Shadows danced at the surface, shapes that twisted and writhed just beneath the water, their outlines brushing against the moonlight like predators circling prey. I yanked one last time, my body fueled by pure terror, and for a moment the grip loosened. I stumbled backward, falling onto the sand, coughing violently as air finally tore its way into my lungs. My chest heaved as I scrambled away on all fours, dragging myself higher onto the dry beach. The chanting faltered, breaking into fragments of sound, but the figures remained. Closer now, impossibly closer, as though the distance between us had collapsed in seconds. Their outlines swayed with the rhythm of the waves, and though their faces remained hidden, I could feel their eyes on me, empty and endless. The wind whipped harder, carrying with it a sound I couldn't mistake this time. Not voices, not chanting, but laughter. Soft, mocking, human. It came from the water, from the figures, from the unseen hands that had tried to drag me under. My stomach turned cold as realization struck. I hadn't imagined them. They weren't visions or hallucinations. They were real, and they were enjoying this. I staggered backward through the sand, my legs heavy as if they still belonged to the sea, my lungs clawing for breath that would not come fast enough. The laughter echoed behind me, soft at first, then rising in pitch until it felt as though the entire shoreline was mocking my escape. I turned and ran, the wet sand clinging to my boots, dragging me down with each step, as if the beach itself wanted me to stay. My heart pounded so violently I could hear it in my ears, louder than the wind, louder than the waves, a primal drumbeat of survival. I didn't dare look back at first, but some cruel instinct forced me to, and what I saw nearly made my legs collapse beneath me. The figures had left the water. They were no longer distant silhouettes on the horizon. They stood at the edge of the surf, lined along the shoreline like a procession of shadows carved from the night. Their movements were subtle, swaying slightly, as if the rhythm of the waves still dictated their form. The moonlight caught them in fragments, shoulders too thin, arms too long, faces blurred and shifting like smoke. They didn't chase me. They didn't need to. They only watched, their presence heavy enough to press against my back like a weight. I could feel their eyes following me, burning holes into my skin, and the further I ran, the stronger the sensation grew. The path to the forest loomed ahead. The same narrow trail that had brought me here, but in the dark it looked distorted, twisted by shadows that seemed deeper than before. I sprinted toward it, the dry sand finally offering firmer ground beneath my feet. But the silence of the jungle was worse than the beach. The trees stood rigid, unmoving, their branches like skeletal hands reaching out to catch me. I could hear footsteps now, faint but deliberate, pacing in rhythm with mine. I told myself it was my imagination, the echo of my own panic, but every instinct knew the truth. Something was moving with me. My legs carried me faster than I thought possible, fueled only by terror. The camera was gone, swallowed by the tide, and with it the proof of what I had seen. But I didn't need proof anymore. I could feel them even now, their presence threading through the air, clinging to me like a shadow I could never shake. I burst into the tree line, the canopy above, swallowing the moonlight, plunging me into near darkness. The ground here was uneven, roots clawing at my boots, branches snapping against my face, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Behind me, from the direction of the beach, came the sound that froze my blood. It wasn't laughter this time. It was chanting, louder, clearer, no longer distant or muffled by water. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, chanting in unison, rising and falling like a song of the abyss. And beneath it, almost hidden, a whisper slipped through, so soft, yet so sharp it pierced my mind directly. "We see you." I stumbled, my knees buckling, but forced myself up again, clawing at branches to pull forward, desperate to put distance between myself and that cursed shore. Yet even as I ran, I felt the truth settle in my chest like ice. I hadn't escaped. Not really. They had let me go. I didn't stop running until the forest broke open into the dirt road where I had left my car hours earlier, though time felt meaningless now, stretched and distorted by what I had witnessed. My body trembled uncontrollably, every muscle burning, lungs raw from gasping. But I forced myself into the driver's seat and locked the doors as though glass and metal could protect me from what lurked beyond. For several minutes, I just sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, listening. The chanting had faded, the whispers were gone, and the night outside was once again still. too still. I turned the key with shaking hands. The engine roared to life, and with a surge of adrenaline, I sped away. Gravel spraying behind me, the dark forest swallowing the path in my rearview mirror. But as the lights of the village finally came into view, relief refused to come. Even now, as I sit miles away from that cursed beach, I can still feel it. The weight of unseen eyes pressing into my back, the phantom grip of those fingers around my ankle, the echo of their laughter rippling in my ears whenever the world falls quiet. Sometimes I dream of the photographs I saw on that camera, the smiling faces frozen in time, their joy moments before the sea claimed them. In those dreams, their faces change. They're no longer strangers. They're people I recognize, friends, family, even my own reflection staring back at me through the lens. I wake drenched in sweat, the sound of waves still pounding in my skull. The locals were right. The beach does not simply take, it waits, patient, eternal, calling out only when the night is darkest and the air is stillest. And once you have heard its song, you are never truly free of it. You can leave the sand, you can escape the tide, but the memory clings like salt to your skin, lingering, festering, whispering in your dreams until the day you return. And I know that one day, whether by choice or by some unseen pull, I will. So if you ever find yourself wandering the Brazilian coast and stumble upon a stretch of beach that feels too quiet, too perfect, remember what I've told you. Remember the stories. Remember the faces that never came back. Because I was one of the lucky ones. I stepped away, but the others, they're still there, waiting in the tide, watching, calling, and maybe even now they're watching you too.